Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this breakout meeting about New Hampshire towns endorsing the carbon cashback policy, a success story. We have incredible speakers today. We have Catherine Gage, who is the unofficial co-leader of the New Hampshire South Central CCL chapter, and John Gage, who is the CCL state coordinator for New Hampshire. Everyone is going to stay muted except for our speakers today, and we are not going to have time for questions on this topic at the end. So if you have questions, if you want to engage with Catherine or John, please take that discussion to the community forum page. Without further ado, I want to hand it over to Catherine and John.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for that kind introduction. Before we begin, I'd just like to note that we will provide our email addresses on the last slide, so feel free to email us with questions. And our forum is called the Carbon Cashback Coalition on CCL Community, so we encourage everyone to use that to help us develop this idea further.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. And thank you, everyone, for your interest in our New Hampshire town endorsement success. This year, the voters in 10% of all New Hampshire towns passed resolutions asking for carbon fee and dividend legislation in their town meetings. We're really excited to share this story to encourage CCL volunteers to try similar coalition-based projects, as well as to recognize and celebrate the contributions and successes of over 100 citizens in New Hampshire that are working on this project. We'll get into that in a moment, but first, don't you just love the phrase, cash back carbon pricing? It really makes a good first impression. It works great in an icebreaker line like, hey, have you heard about cash back carbon pricing? People want to know more about it. Okay, now for our story.
So a dilemma CCL volunteers have always had in New Hampshire is that there's a lot of people in our state who are concerned about climate change, but have given up hope for federal action or a global solution. So instead choose to direct their energy to local actions like reducing their individual carbon footprints and protesting specific pipeline or coal plant projects. These are definitely really important, but they're not a solution to climate change. There are a lot of groups in New Hampshire working on various aspects of the climate problem, encouraging actions, engaging volunteers, and raising money. The questions we CCL volunteers often ask is how can we tap into that depth of climate volunteer enthusiasm and direct energy to actions that are not only local and achievable, but also effective at the appropriate scale for the problem.
Today we'll talk about one of the ways we're addressing that in New Hampshire. We'll start with what we did and the group that we helped create to do it, the Carbon Cashback Coalition, or C3. Then we'll talk about how it got started and how it works. And we'll finish up by highlighting what made many of the CCL volunteer contributions possible, which is the CCL magic, the methodology of helping individuals develop their personal and political powers and the many successes that makes possible.
The New Hampshire Carbon Cashback Coalition, or C3, is a grassroots effort that was founded by members of local climate groups and state energy committees and is advised by several state legislators. We were able to introduce cashback carbon pricing to climate-focused people in the state through collaboration and a local action that had something in it that motivated everyone. We did this by showing volunteers how to put a resolution into their town election this spring. The resolution was titled, A New Hampshire Resolution to Take Action on Climate Pollution, and it basically says, the voters of our town ask our state and federal legislators to pass carbon fee and dividend legislation. By putting this resolution in town elections, we were able to educate voters about carbon fee and dividend and give well over 100,000 New Hampshire citizens the opportunity to vote to ask for carbon fee and dividend legislation. To do this, a C3 steering committee formed and developed a set of instructions and resources to support citizens who volunteered to champion this for their town.
One of the resources we created is a website. This is the homepage of the C3 project, carboncashback.org. I just pasted the link into the chat right now. If you're familiar with using Zoom and other windows at the same time, you can try loading this into your browser and scroll down to the bottom of that page and you'll see the current C3 town election results. The green slice in the pie chart on the right represents the 24 towns that voted yes to the C3 resolution. As I mentioned before, that's 10% of all the towns in New Hampshire. They're listed on the left side of the page. The pie chart also shows that 10 other towns voted but did not pass the resolution. In other words, 70% of all the towns that voted on the resolution did pass it. 9 other towns are pending due to being delayed by COVID, and in total, 81 towns got involved this year, 43 of which submitted their signed petitions to their towns to get this resolution on the ballot, and the rest are planning to do so next year. And for next year, we have a goal of doing this in 200 towns. So how did CCL help make this happen? Well, regular citizens like us joined CCL. We learned new skills from CCL newsletters, training, chapter meetings, and conferences. We tried some new actions and did some things that were out of our comfort zones. And doing that eventually led to a few of us attending this state carbon pricing bill hearing that is pictured here last October. This was one of several hearings held by the bill co-sponsors to educate the House Science, Technology, and Energy Committee members about carbon pricing. The state bill is based on the carbon fee and dividend policy with some modifications for the state level. It is a steadily increasing carbon fee that starts at $20 per ton of CO2 emitted on imported fossil fuels and electricity. It rises by $10 a ton for 10 years, and it has a full cashback dividend to households, returning 1 equal share per adult. There are no border adjustments because of the difficulty of doing that at the state level, which may be a concern in the long run, but on our northern border, Canada already has carbon fee and dividend now, and all the states that border New Hampshire are also considering carbon pricing bills. I was the third speaker at this hearing. I take pictures at things like this when I can't believe it's me doing something. I'm an introverted software engineer. And before CCL, I never did anything like testify at a hearing. But after the hearing was over, so I spoke about carbon pricing at the national and international levels. And when the hearing was over, several people in the gallery stayed behind to chat. A few of them were excited that their climate group, the PEMI Climate Emergency Coalition, had just convinced their town council to declare a climate emergency. On the heels of that success, they were looking for something else to do. They thought that putting a resolution in their town's election to support this state carbon pricing bill might be a good idea. One of the legislators that was still in the room came by and overheard that, and she said, you know, if you came up with the text, you could do that in more than one town. And a couple CCL people were there also, and one of them chimed in, boy, if you're gonna do that at the state level, maybe we could put something in there about the federal level as well. It was kind of a magical moment. We all kind of looked around at each other and thought, that sounds pretty good. So we decided to meet for coffee and consider the idea further. So that was the formation of the C3 Steering Committee. We met a few times, decided on roles, wrote the resolution text, and created the carboncashback.org website to provide support for people we hoped to enlist to help. So let's return to the website. If you're following in your browser, you should be on the C3 homepage right now still, which provides the basic messaging. That is, we want cashback carbon pricing because scientists and economists agree it's the best first step to reduce climate pollution. And we need your help to take action in your town to help make it happen. So see the tabs across the top? Those go to the other pages. The Carbon Cashback page provides information about the policy and about the bills at the state and federal level. The Benefits page provides the results of independent analysis on cashback carbon pricing that many CCL volunteers will be very familiar with. And the Files page provides all the resources we created for use by C3 town champions, such as the resolution petition, instructions, talking points documents and scripts, sample letters to the editor, and printable cards and posters.
After we finished the website and the resolution text, it was time to recruit volunteers. The coalition had formed with members of several local climate groups, so each group reached out to their network looking for volunteers to be town champions who would bring the resolution in to endorse cashback carbon pricing into their town election. My dad communicated to all the other New Hampshire CCL chapter leaders about the Carbon Cashback Coalition, and we spoke about it at chapter meetings. 5 town champions are shown in this picture of our January CCL chapter meeting, and at this meeting, another high schooler signed up to be the town champion for Bow. My dad and I also called a lot of people on our chapter contact list, and some CCL volunteers who we never even heard from before became town champions. I also spoke at an assembly at my school about how I had been volunteering with CCL and lobbying members of Congress to support cashback carbon pricing, and it would help the members of Congress support it if New Hampshire voters asked them to. I described the help we were looking for with the Carbon Cashback Coalition, and several students and teachers signed up to be town champions. So what's it like to be a town champion? The process is different in each town, so every town champion started by calling their town administrator to learn how citizen resolutions can be put in their town election, when the deadline for those submissions are, and how the election works. The next thing to do is collect signatures of voters on a petition to enter the resolution into the election, and most towns needed 25 signatures. For Windham, New Hampshire, I started with my neighborhood, and then my dad and I went to the transfer station. I just asked people who walked by if they'd be interested in signing a petition to get a resolution in the election that asked our state and federal legislators to address climate change. Most people said yes, and very few actually asked for details. So we handed out cards with the link to carboncashback.org so people could learn the details when they got home. Once the petition for the resolution was submitted, there were several opportunities to speak in favor of the resolution at town meetings, such as deliberative sessions or Board of Selectmen meetings. The town champions often spoke at these meetings and also sometimes brought along friends who could speak in favor also. Then finally, the town champions worked on helping the resolution pass by educating voters about it. We did this through letters to the editor in the local paper, putting up posters from carboncashback.org up around town, and talking to voters on election day.
Once all the C3 steering committee members sent out their calls to enlist C3 town champions across the state, the next month was a little like surfing a tsunami, or more actually like surfing this 100-foot record wave in Nazaré, Portugal. By mid-January, we had identified town champions in over 60 towns. Groups were inviting us to speak at their meetings, and reporters were calling us for interviews. A few weeks later, we had over 70 towns with C3 town champions, and town petition submission deadlines were upon us or had passed. All this attention was also getting noticed in the Concord State House.
New Hampshire state legislators appreciated our efforts in raising awareness about the benefits of their cashback carbon pricing bill. This quote is part of a press release from Representative Robert Baucus, who's the chairman of the New Hampshire House Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. He wrote, "We are strongly encouraged by efforts to bring the climate issue before town meeting voters this spring through petitioned warrant articles." Warrant articles are New Hampshire's way of putting a resolution up to vote. As the public becomes more engaged in the climate crisis and more informed on the issue of carbon pricing, we are confident that approach will be recognized as the most effective way to reduce carbon pollution.
So this is where we start to talk about success. We received this email last weekend. Another town had just approved the resolution. That's a great way to start your day. Vote outcomes are one measure of success, but the C3 members experienced success in many forms. First, this was a bit of a CCL success. The powerful combination of collaborating with other groups and contributing CCL resources did something new for us. People that hadn't connected with CCL before became excited about carbon fee and dividend. Second, there were many individual successes of people who collected signatures, put the resolution onto their town's election, and spoke up at their town meetings. Many of them had never done that before. Even where towns failed to pass the measure, C3 town champions felt empowered and successful in what they had accomplished. Like Jean-Pierre, a senior from Franklin Pierce University, who said, "I had the privilege of working with amazing individuals and coming up with creative ways to reach out to the Range community about carbon fee and dividend." And she added, "Many people now know about it, and I hope that it will pass next year." In Merrimack, the high school student who we saw in the picture before in Merrimack, high school students stood up and spoke in favor of the measure at their town meeting right before their town passed the resolution. And the Bow High School student that we saw in the picture before ended up being interviewed by the New Hampshire Public Radio and had a nice radio piece about her on the radio and a story written about her efforts. And some of the towns voted overwhelmingly in favor of the resolution, like Jackson, which passed the resolution 100-3. And third, we had the press coming to us. We wrote a lot of letters to the editor, but it's even easier to get in the paper when reporters are calling you and they do the writing. We were on the front page of our Capitals paper, the Concord Monitor, twice. See the media page on carboncashback.org for a list of about 70 media hits over the last several months.
A few other states are starting to consider a similar effort, including Maine, Massachusetts, Delaware, and New Jersey. And you can do this in your state too. Here's a few suggestions if you're considering this. One rule we decided to stick with is that cashback should mean 100% revenue neutral for the state and the federal bills. In addition to attracting bipartisan support by being revenue neutral, being consistent makes the messaging much easier. For example, you can use the phrase, the carbon fee and dividend approach at the state and federal level. The strength of this project was due to collaboration with other groups. Citizens Climate Lobby was not driving this effort alone, so the coalition aspect appealed to a wider range of volunteers. We recommend you launch this effort through teamwork with local environmental groups and legislators that share common objectives, while treating everyone as peers. We started with general ideas, tested them, and adapted as we went. Every state, and even towns within a state, run local elections differently, so it was important to let each C3 town champion know that they were responsible for figuring out the process in their town. Some more things to consider are, does your state allow citizens to put resolutions up to vote in the elections? And if not, how do they get there, and how can you work through this process? And also, does your state have a carbon pricing bill in progress, and is it revenue neutral? If not, then talking to a few state legislators would be a great place to start. And finally, you're all welcome to copy and modify any of the resources on carboncashback.org. We're excited about other states possibly doing this.
This is the True Brew Barista in Concord, New Hampshire, where the C3 Steering Committee first met for coffee to hash out the plan. This project is an example of CCL in action. By providing training, resources, and support, CCL helps people learn how to take effective action, develop skills, and encourages them to go out of their comfort zone in the name of doing something important. CCL empowers ordinary people like you and Catherine and me to contribute effectively. Some of the volunteers involved in this project use the skills and experience we have personally developed through CCL's training and support. We were also able to share that with others. Our past efforts to go out of our comfort zones and try new and scary things had led to abilities many of us did not know we had in us. Though many personal successes people had as town champions, we saw firsthand that truly is where the magic happens. So this is how the C3 Steering Committee is meeting now. There are several other active members not pictured, Ted, Ken, Rich, Kat, and a few others. The personal rewards of working with other people who are also concerned about climate change are definitely worth mentioning. Friendships develop. You build a reputation, and as you learn things from others, your sphere of influence expands. We are extremely grateful for those in CCL who led the way for us. As Madeline Pera, CCL's Director of Programs, often says, action is the antidote to despair. I've certainly found that to be true. And also, I found that the more you do, the more you can do. And although it's not easy to get started, then it's also not easy to stop once you do get started. Thank you so much for your time and for all your efforts to address climate change. Together, we are going to get a good bill through Congress soon. Please get in touch if you would like to explore doing a carbon cashback coalition in your state.
Thank you so much for coming to our talk and for all you're doing to address climate change.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.